I had always seen the band as a means to an end. In my mind, making music was only part of the plan. The master plan was to create a cultural institution that was as iconic as Disney. From the start, we didn't care that it invalidated what we did. We were not concerned with credibility.
No.
It just looked like a lot of fun. All of a sudden, we were one of the biggest bands in the world.
One of Bill's follies was the movie Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. He thought that film was the next step for us. The Beatles had A Hard Day's Night and Help, and we should have our film. He sold it to us as A Hard Day's Night meets Star Wars, which had come out the year before. It would have lots of cool special effects. Nobody in the band had the slightest clue about acting. None of us read the script. We didn't care. We trusted Bill's judgment. When we started filming, it didn't take an expert in the field to know we were in deep shit, and there was no getting out of it.
The great Bill Aucoin had a great idea of merchandising us and putting on this great, crazy show. I really felt it was like Batman meets Robin.
The movie was shot at an amusement park called Magic Mountain, which had the biggest roller coaster in the world. The entire story took place in the park. The story was, a mad scientist was terrorizing visitors to this haunted amusement park. Kiss helped to unmask the scientist and solve the mystery. The director of the movie was Gordon Hessler. He was actually very sweet about it. He would do a shot and ask us how things went. What did we know?
The director asked us after each scene whether we thought it was good. We had no idea what we were doing. For us, a good take was one where we didn't blow our lines. If we said the right words, we moved on to the next shot. Someone off camera fed us our lines. When we got ready to roll the camera, I yelled, "Line!" And someone said something like, "Gee, Ace, it's time we get going." Then I said, "Gee, Ace, it's time we get going."
They basically shot around us because we were the stars. We took 2 hours to put our makeup on. By that time, Ace and Peter were miserable.
One, I don't care, because I got other things to do in my life, so I don't really pay attention to other people.
Meanwhile, the four of us weren't speaking unless we were delivering lines. Peter and Ace frequently left during filming.
That's because I wasn't there, I was the peacemaker. Whenever anybody in the band fought, I try to, say, come on, let's kiss and break up. And, without the dynamic of me being in the band,
When we did Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, the rest of the band was incensed because the newspaper ads usually showed a much larger photo of me. If they showed any other figure, they were all in the background, and my face was 4 times the size of everybody else's. Paul and I have always had a kind of brotherly competitive thing, and we had quite a bit of back and forth over the years. Paul would get slightly angry because he perceived that I was dominating the band too much, or vice versa. But the ads for the movie, and particularly those in TV Guide, really bothered Ace and Peter. They felt they weren't as involved in the film as Paul and I were. We didn't really have a choice. First of all, Peter had been involved in yet another car accident. He skidded 400 feet before he crashed, and he wound up in the hospital. When he did speak in the movie, he was impossible to understand because of his thick Brooklyn accent, so his voice was dubbed by someone else. We had 2 writers with us who were writing the script for Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, and they wanted to get a sense of how everybody talked before they wrote the script. Ace in those days was non-communicative. He didn't say much. No matter what you said to him, he would make the parrot sound, "Awk!" Nobody understood it, and when he wasn't making the parrot noise, he would mumble nonsense to himself. 13 for a dozen, or "I kills them all, one by one," and then he would laugh. These phrases meant something only to Ace, and nobody had a clue what he was talking about. When the script came in, Ace's character never spoke. He only said, "Awk." Ace was furious. He wanted to know why they didn't give him any lines. To their credit, they turned around and said, "What are you, nuts? You have never said anything to us except awk. We thought that's the way you want to talk." Ace said he had a lot to say. Well, he should have said it.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
In one scene, we had to use Ace's stunt double, who happened to be black, after Ace left without notice. It was clear as day in the final version that it wasn't Ace.
He was a sweetheart because I had an argument with the producer and I stormed off in my Mercedes and he was gracious enough to fill in for me for that shoot in the dungeon there with Frankenstein and Dracula.
Could you imagine John Lennon getting bit by Dracula?
Even the simple matter of getting Peter and Ace in front of the camera didn't always work out. Sometimes they went missing. They just didn't come to the set. The only solution was to use doubles. For Peter, we had a 55-year-old guy, and we put makeup on him. For Ace, an African-American stunt double.
We had to play a fake concert at Magic Mountain Amusement Park for another scene. When we were on stage, I turned around and saw some random old man in cat makeup and a wig playing the drums and chewing gum. Peter had taken off, and they threw this guy up there.
I didn't know much when we did Kiss Meets the Phantom. I felt like having a good time in the park and having a great old party as far as I was concerned.
Making the movie wasn't smooth, it wasn't easy, and it wasn't particularly fun. But like almost everything else we did then, it was a success.
When the movie was finished, we saw it at a screening at the Screen Actors Guild Theater on Sunset Boulevard. If you thought it was bad on a TV screen, you should have seen it on the big screen. People openly laughed. I slunk down in my seat. It was humiliating. The finished film was absolutely awful, and to have to stand when the lights came up while various people who had been involved with it came over to lie to me about how great it was made it that much more humiliating.
Oh, no!
Kiss Meets the Phantom was eventually shown on NBC at Halloween. Because the television ratings were so strong, AFCO Embassy released it theatrically outside the United States. When we toured Canada, I saw it at a movie theater. When we toured Australia, I saw it at a drive-in.
Journalists constantly dismissed us with the same basic argument. If we were any good musically, we wouldn't need any of the visual effects. What never seemed to occur to them was the possibility that we were good and that we wanted and loved all the rest. Part of the perception problem had to do with Neil Bogart and Casablanca Records. The label released Donna Summer's disco anthem, Love to Love You Baby, which became a smash hit over the course of 1976. Its singles were Neil's thing, and it altered the way he did business. He made Casablanca into a singles-oriented label and focused on acts like the Village People. Kiss went from being the signature band on Casablanca to being part of a sideshow label, part of a menagerie. Instead of being in the company of rock bands, we shared a label with a bunch of guys dressed up like construction workers and cops and a band that wore ballet slippers. People who wanted to see us as pap or contrived had only to look at the company we were in to reinforce their suspicions.
Wow.
But sometimes it had a darker side that corresponded to things we overheard. As if our entrepreneurial ability weren't a positive trait, but rather a trait of deceit or manipulation, because that wasn't rock and roll.
No.
Barely below the surface of the band's interactions was a simmering and ongoing resentment and anger directed at me and Gene. We ran the band and wrote almost all the songs and generated the ideas. Not because Kiss was a dictatorship, but because the other guys' contributions just didn't amount to much. Their jealousy and envy and resentment got focused on the most tangible thing they could pin it on. As a result, the two of them tried to sabotage the band, which, as they saw it, was unfairly manipulated by those money-grubbing Jews. But of course, we kept up the mythology. 4 guys running down the street, jumping in the air, living under one roof.
I was always a fan of the Beatles, man.
Just substitute New York for Liverpool, and that was us. Yeah. Yeah, right.
I'm too old for that stuff. I got so much great things in life. Life should be positive for you and me now. I mean, it's a good thing to be. Every day above ground's a good day.
At that time, misinformation about the band began to spread in the southern Bible Belt states, including a rumor that the name Kiss stood for Knights in Satan's Service.
The 4 of us were devil worshippers.
It was just about, the fact that, I was brought up in a religious home. I was raised a Christian, and, I'm not a big devil worshipping fan.
Ironically, this rumor started as a result of an interview I gave in Circus Magazine after our first album. In response to a question, I said that I sometimes wondered what human flesh tastes like. I never wanted to really find out, but I was curious intellectually. Later on, this comment seemed to ignite the whole idea that in some way Kiss was aligned with devil worship.
When we pulled into arenas now, we saw people brandishing banners and placards and carrying crosses. I was astonished. These people quoted the Bible and called our music satanic. You're talking about us? I laughed at the protests at first. As far as I was concerned, they had their hands full monitoring their own practitioners, which turned out to be true as scandals later engulfed Jimmy Swaggart, Jim Baker, and others. I found it amusing that whenever a televangelist was tempted by the devil, it was usually in a hotel with a hooker. The person you have to watch is the one pointing the finger.
Fueling the fire for the Satan-worshipping nonsense was my hand signal, which involved the pinky, the thumb, and the index finger. They thought it was a gesture of some kind, so they started waving their index and pinky fingers toward me in return. The second part of the hand signal came from my love of Spider-Man. In the comics, he sometimes had his middle finger pressed against the inside of his palm. I copied that in an early photo, and the fundamentalists seized on it. In point of fact, the hand signal actually means I love you in sign language, though I didn't know that at the time. This hand signal, ironically enough, became a standard gesture for other heavy metal bands and their fans, and it has been in constant circulation ever since.
Later on, I decided I wanted to counter these people. At times, I thought Gene took things too far by trying to use them to fan the fire. I simply wanted to say the allegations weren't true. We were not knights in Satan's service or devil worshippers or anything else. Yes, we had a bass player who spat blood and breathed fire and called himself Evil Incarnate, but if you went to the movies, you'd also see a guy who wanted to suck your blood, and another with bolts in his neck who'd been brought back to life by a mad scientist and a jolt of electricity. If they saw a guy on TV with his face painted white and his hair pulled up on top of his head and thought he was real and that he was stating facts when he said he was Evil Incarnate, they were the ones who were crazy, not us. Did these people really think we looked like this all day? Yeah. Did they also think the guy who played Batman was really Batman? Yeah. For me, it wasn't about fighting the system. It was about picking your path and believing in yourself. Despite what the religious protesters said, KISS was all positivity. Hell, all anyone had to do was listen to the lyrics from our mission statement off Destroyer shouted out loud. Well, the night's begun and you want some fun. Do you think you're gonna find it? You got to treat yourself like number one. Do you need to be reminded? If you don't feel good, there's a way you could. Don't sit there broken-hearted. Call all your friends in the neighborhood and get the party started. At the same time religious protesters vilified us for being a danger to America's youth, music critics killed us because in other ways we weren't dangerous enough.